we all watched Sam Darnold have another really freaking good game last night, and I think it's the question has probably crossed all of our minds at this point. Did the Niners keep the wrong quarterback?
Yeah, man. I mean, it's definitely a question. I know most Niners fans, including myself, will probably say, no, because that was my biggest thing is Kyle couldn't. I was actually talking to Ryan on Twitter, Ryan Hensley on Twitter about this. Is Kyle couldn't get this out of him either. He played week 18 with the Rams, 17 against the Rams last year, and he didn't look good preseason. A lot of people thought Trey Lance beat Darnold out last year, besides Lombardi. But
I was one of them, actually.
Yeah.
To me, what I thought Darnold did in training camp was just check down relentlessly. Like, I'm not going to throw a pick today. I'm not going to make any mistakes. Maybe that's what he needed to do to rebuild his confidence, like not make mistakes for a while. I don't know. I didn't see it.
Or maybe what he needed was KOC to say, dude, you have Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. Like, let it rip.
Also, he has a ton of time to throw.
Yeah, he does have a great offensive line, which he did not have with us. He also has Justin Jefferson, which we could have had, but he did not have with us.
True.
But yeah, I mean, that's where you had a take that I actually really liked, which was the Niners should gamble on Zach Wilson next year for their backup. And I completely agree with that because I think he's a Sam Darnold story, right? Undisciplined on the Jets, kind of bumbled around. I feel like Zach Wilson didn't get nearly enough time as Darnold either, though. And who knows, man? What if he's the next Darnold Geno project where he just needed a good place to go, a good place to be with good weapons and good coaching?
Are the Niners a good place to be anymore? That's the question, though. It's
for a quarterback, that's a good question.
Because like the offensive line is in shambles. Kyle's offensive scheme isn't hitting like it used to.
Yeah.
A lot of the weapons are getting old. Christian McCaffrey, don't know. So, I mean, like when Darnold came here 2 years ago, this was like the sort of like quarterback rehab camp.
Yeah.
And now I don't know that it is anymore. I mean, look at Brock Purdy. He's kind of struggling.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's kind of the big thing. I think that's what's big about this offseason is kind of seeing where that should lie, like how our quarterback room is doing, because Kyle really does have a blind spot for quarterback, right? Darnold is a perfect example with what KOC could get out of him and what Kyle could get out of him. Yes, we can play him offensive line, but Kyle made Jimmy Garoppolo work, man. If you can make Jimmy Garoppolo work, you're going to have a tough time convincing me that even with offensive line, you couldn't make someone with 10 times Jimmy Garoppolo's talent work.
Well, here's the thing. Let's go back and revisit the Sam Darnold era with the 49ers.
Right.
Like, he didn't play well in that week 18 game against the Rams. Yep. But to be fair to Samuel, Mr. Darnold, he was playing with backups. So it's kind of hard to read into that game one way or another.
For sure.
The one thing you could really say is that the Niners correctly identified him as someone worthwhile, someone worth coaching, someone who could be successful. They saw it. They brought him in and gave him zero opportunity to compete for the starting job. They never really saw what the Vikings were able to uncover. And the one game where they had the opportunity was the Ravens game, because Purdy left that game with a concussion. He was awful. He threw 4 picks in that game, no touchdowns. Darnold comes in, actually throws 14 passes in that game against the Ravens. And maybe it was garbage time, but he was like decidedly better than Purdy in the same game on the same team against the same opponent.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder. Like, there was that stretch where Purdy may have gotten injured against Minnesota. I think there was a quarterback sneak, and there was a question like, did he get dinged in that game? Because he stunk after that and threw a couple of picks. They could have benched him against Cincinnati just as a precautionary measure and started Darnold for one freaking game just to see what it looked like, just to see how it felt, if you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, they didn't do it. And it's like, man, you messed up.
And that's a weird thing, right? Is because in the training camp, Kyle's like, oh yeah, he reminds me of Steve Young. So I was like, wow, Kyle loves this guy. But then every opportunity you have to like show the love, it's kind of, no, never mind. I'm good. Like,
it's like he was here to push Trey Lance off the team. Okay, great. mission accomplished. But it seems like he could have done. Tyler. He's 14-2 right now.
Yeah.
And you could make a compelling argument that he should be the MVP in the entire NFL. No one thought the Vikings would be this good. Even though he has a good team. 14-2? He's a better record than Josh Allen.
You know what's funny, though, as I was looking at his stats yesterday, because I was just curious. Like, let's see how good he's doing this year. His stats, I mean, they're not as good as Purdy's were last year, but it kind of resembles like, got a good team around him. He's now a top 10 quarterback statistically. I mean, you could make the argument he's still Darnold. Yeah.
He's money in close games. He blows people out. Like, I never saw this coming. I've apologized before, but Samuel, I'm so sorry. I would talk so slick about this guy, and he would hold the door open for me going into the lock. Here you go, man. The nicest guy in the world. Sam, I was wrong, and I'm sorry. Wow.
Yeah, I don't get it. It really does show you how much good coaching can affect a player with talent. Like, can say whatever you want about like even the Zach Wilsons or whoever, right? Even Michael Penix hasn't been that good. But what if they have like a great coach by it? What if they have KOC? Is KOC the best quarterback coach in the league?
He's quite good. Or the guy in Tampa is doing a great job with Baker. I got another thing that it shows the 49ers. And I think they got to take this to heart and adjust now. Look what a great offensive line can do for a quarterback. Yeah. I mean, the Rams threw Jared Goff away, and then the Lions are like, oh, you'll give us 2 first-round picks and this quarterback? All we have to do is build an offensive line, and we're good. The Niners, for years, have been like, no, defensive line. No, man, the Lions lost their entire defensive line. They're doing great because their offensive line is killer. Maybe the Niners should learn from that, because you could argue that we're never going to really know who Brock Purdy is truly until he has a good offensive line, because the Brock supporters will say he's running for his life, and there's truth to that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that is the one thing that's so weird is Kyle is such a run-heavy, motion, zone run scheme. Why is offensive line so low on the priority list for you? And that's where
let's talk about that, because this goes back a little bit before your time. Back in the 90s, when Mike Shanahan made the outside zone like the thing in the NFL, a big reason he liked it is that he felt the kind of players who could execute it were the kind of offensive linemen that the rest of the league wasn't really looking for. Smaller, lighter. They're good at running, reaching and running and doing a particular style of blocking that most other teams are doing, power and counter and gap blocking and pinning and pulling. Where the other, like the Cowboys in the 90s, were looking for offensive linemen who were 330 pounds. This guy was looking for guys who were like 280. And so all of a sudden he could get guys who fit his scheme in round 6. And that was a benefit for him. But now it's like, I don't know, man. Everyone's running the scheme, and other teams are getting premium talent to run it, and you can't pass block, and your run blocking isn't that good either. And I asked him, I was like, what makes the Lions such a challenge to face? And he's like, oh, well, anytime you got a team with that good of an offensive line, they can really control the game. It's like, yeah,
exactly. And that's you notice it with the Texans too, right? With what you were just saying, their outside zone running, you see that get crumbled in a second. You saw it whenever they played this week. CJ Stroud running for his life. Every time they went outside with Joe Mixon, he was met in the backfield by like 3-4 defensive linemen. It was just like, when are you going to realize, like, I mean, the Eagles, they have a good combo, right? Like Jason Kelce wasn't the biggest offensive lineman. He was a smaller guy. They have smaller guys on their line, but they somehow make an iron wall offensive line. It just seems like laziness. Like he's obsessed with grabbing receivers in the first round. Brandon Ayuk, Debo, Pearsall. Like, we have so many receivers from the first round. I don't think we've drafted one offensive lineman in the first round since Kyle's been here, right?
Yeah.
So why? Like, it seems like the one thing he would adore to grab is like a great tackle, or especially for an outside zone scheme, an amazing tackle.
Yeah, and it's like the thing with Purdy is like he's so attractive to Kyle because he can run the scheme and operate behind a subpar offensive line. Like, why should those be your top 2 considerations? A team like Detroit or Minnesota can put together this fortress in front of the quarterback with their offensive line, give him some weapons, and be like, we can just take a guy who was a top pick and was kind of like unfairly labeled a bust, put him on our team, and now we have like a really talented quarterback for cheap, doing really well. Whereas like Kyle's trying to make it make it work with the last pick in the draft.
Yeah.
It's like we don't have to do that. We don't have to
No.
do that at all. And I feel like the Niners theoretically could be so close to being Detroit and Minnesota. Like you had the weapons, you had the coach, you just didn't have the offensive line.
Yeah.
And you had the quarterback too. You just let him go. Can you imagine if the Niners had just given Sam Darnold a shot, one start? Maybe they could have kept him. I mean, it's not like he's playing. It's not like he's expensive this year. What, he was like a 1-year deal for like $8 million?
Yeah, it wasn't bad. It was like, I think it was more expensive than we got him, but it wasn't anything crazy. And that's the thing and that's why I'm such a big proponent for Zach Wilson. Like, I think we were talking about it last time. That's the big difference between whenever everybody compares Kyle to Andy Reid is like, that's the big difference is Andy Reid was able to identify quarterbacks like nonstop. Donovan McNabb, Michael Vick, Patrick Mahomes, even Alex Smith. Mm-hmm. Kyle would never grab quarterbacks like that. Like he likes Jimmy Garoppolo, Brock Purdy. And then when he does
TJ Beathard, Nick Mullins.
And when he tries to find talent, it's like Trey Lance, which I also think Trey Lance didn't get a fair shake. I don't think Kyle's good enough at developing a quarterback.
But Trey Lance was like the biggest project of all time. And this was a veteran team that didn't have that kind of time.
And so I think that's like the biggest issue. And that's why they should make a move for a Zach Wilson I think Zach Wilson's been around great coaching at this point. He's been around Sean Payton. I think Sean Payton was a great person to sit behind. He got to sit behind Bo Nix, Jarrett Stidham. So a veteran and a rookie to get both. I think Kyle needs to be able to take a jump for a quarterback with talent and just kind of because he's kind of let Purdy do that this year where it's like, okay, sure. Yeah. Like freestyle if you want, but not too much. Dude, if you let someone like Darnold last year or Zach Wilson have that kind of control, it would actually look good. It wouldn't be like a floaty 20-yard post. Like,
and I love that you brought up Reed. Because it's like if Reed were coaching this team and he had Sam Darnold and Brock Purdy, like which one would he have kept? All I know is the starting quarterbacks Reed has had have all been top 10 picks for 26 years. He came into the league and immediately drafted Donovan McNabb with the second pick. When he got old, he went and got Michael Vick, who was a number 1 pick. Then he went to Kansas City and got Alex Smith, who was a number 1 pick. He wasn't messing around with mid picks who fit his scheme. It's like, no. I can coach the best talents in the league. Bring them to me. If they thought football was hard before, I'll make it easy for them. I'll give them a screen game, all kind of easy stuff, and they'll have the best season of their career. He's done it over and over again, whereas Kyle really hasn't been able to do that. He had that one really good year with Matt Ryan and immediately went back to his comfort zone, which is guy picked around 99 to 130.
And that's another thing, right? Is Andy Reid was never afraid to be like, yeah, this guy's solid / good, but I want better. I want a great talent. Like before Vic, it was that Kevin, I forgot his name. Kevin
never worked.
Cobb. Yeah. And he was like 3-4 games in, even when he was getting like, after he was healthy, he's like, nah, Vic is the guy. Like it's Vic.
This guy's mid.
And Alex Smith, same thing. Alex Smith was playing great. He was playing at an MVP level for the Chiefs.
I think he led the league in quarterback rating his final season as a starter there.
And he was like, nah, we want Mahomes.
Yeah.
Like, whereas Kyle would never do that. He didn't with Purdy and Darnold. He's like, no, Purdy's good enough. Jimmy's good enough.
Well, that's interesting to me. I feel like John Lynch is very much like Jimmy was good enough. Purdy is good enough. I'm not a big Kyle Shanahan guy, but one thing I do like about him is that he seems to be perpetually unsatisfied with his quarterbacks, as am I.